Viability and effectiveness. What are these two terms or concepts? What do these mean? So viability is is something able to achieve a result, or in the case of Fire Emblem Engage, can something beat the game? That's viability. And what is effectiveness? Effectiveness is how strong that thing is, especially when compared to other options. So if we look at the game of chess, you can deliver checkmate with a pawn. Is it likely to happen? Not really. Is it something you can easily set up? Definitely not. But is it possible? Yes. However, in the endgame, of course, a pawn can promote to any piece, including the queen, and essentially become a better unit. But in the game of Fire Emblem Engage, you can take certain units that are kind of like underpowered, kind of like a little weak, and do things to improve them, kind of similar to how a pawn promotes. But I wouldn't say that these pawns promote into queens. I would compare bad units or units that have like initial friction or that are just outclassed by other units as being like under promoted pieces like a pawn. And eventually you can turn them into a bishop, maybe a rook if you put in enough elbow grease. But eventually most units have like a cap, like they hit like a point where other units are just simply better than them. So like Kagetsu versus Lapis is like the classic example. Kagetsu comes in with insane stats and is basically just objectively better than Lapis. And Lapis also has a passive that works against her, like one of her best use cases, which is a crit build. So the fact that she has like a bad passive that works against her build archetype, the fact that she has lower base stats, and in some cases lower growths. I think she has higher speed growth by 5%, but she has much worse strength growth. And he also has higher, I think he even has higher build than her, which is absolutely disgusting because build is a stat that's very hard to get. So if you want to run different weaponry or try different classes or branch out, having low build is like a death sentence. You're basically unable to do so reliably without some kind of, special attention given to the unit. And that's something that usually is required of bad units. Like units that aren't as good as like the metagame units tend to require special attention. They tend to require stat boosters to remain viable. They tend to have some friction that gets in the way. So like for example, Panette, honestly, I was just running her wrong on my first playthrough. This is my fourth. You just hand her a Brave Axe with Ike's thing and she one rounds most things, or you can run her on crits and she can one round most things. She is a glass cannon in that she has low speed, and even though she has high health on maddening, she'll usually get one rounded, but as long as you position her well, she can just run up and just one round a dude. But she's a perfect example of a low investment unit where they just hand you her and she's good. Same thing with Timera. Timera, you just hand her a good weapon and she's good to go. Right now she's on Ike. She can almost double these. She's still a little bit slow right now, but eventually her build will increase and she will get a little bit faster. So right now she's using a Silver Lance, which is a heavy weapon. So if I handed her Chloe's Steel Lance right now, she should be able to double these guys. But certain units require almost no investment to be good, and other units require a ton of investment. And I don't think it's useful to conflate the two concepts. Like effectiveness and viability are completely different things. And I've kind of been seeing, like in the comments and some other like F-YouTubers talking about how everyone's viable, therefore you should just run whoever you want. And that's true to some degree. Like if you want to just run who you like on maddening mode, it's fine. You can probably beat the game with them. It's just going to be harder. So if you just want to beat maddening mode, if you're having a hard time with it, this is why this matters. So like let's say you're not that experienced with higher difficulties, you're not that experienced with Fire Emblem, you're going to want the better units. And if you are a veteran of Fire Emblem, you can make anything work. So from the point of view of a Fire Emblem veteran, these other units don't feel as bad because they know how to use them better. Whereas if you're a newer player or you're trying maddening mode for the first time, you're really going to want to know who is good and why and how to make use of those units. So for example, Chloe is pretty worthwhile to invest in. She consistently one rounds most things, and then like throughout most of the game. And the only thing that you really need to do is maybe give her a strength booster or a better weapon for endgame, and she'll be fine. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. I just wanted to talk about the difference between viability and effectiveness because they're completely different things. And I kind of see this argument occurring or this argument is being made where because a unit is viable, it's now effective. And that's just not the case. Like the queen in chess is better than the rook. And the only situation in which it's not is if there's some kind of position where the rook can checkmate or win some material by doing some specific set of moves that forces your opponent to do something. So in this instance, in terms of raw power, there are people saying that rooks are better than queens, and I don't think that that's useful. I don't think that that's helpful to people who are new to the game and don't understand which units to run and why. And they might end up running units that really aren't that useful or good. So you can see Chimera does double with a Killer Lance, which is actually a heavy weapon, surprisingly. She didn't get the crit though, but it's an unupgraded, non-engraved Killer Lance. That's actually probably viable on her, to be honest, like a killer build. She just needs an engraving. But yeah, that's it for this one. I just wanted to talk about the difference between the two things. And, you know, if it matters or not which units you run, it definitely does, especially if you're struggling with the game. The better you get at the game, the more anything is viable. And this is also true of, like, Fire Emblem 3 Houses, because I did 2 skip-only runs where you're not allowed to recruit or do monastery or auxiliary battles or paralogs. So, like, the only thing you're allowed to use are your starting units and units that you get, like, automatically at the end of chapters. And that was insanely difficult to some degree. I know the maps, so, like, that helps. I understand how to break the maps down. But arguably, you could say, oh, well, all these units are viable in the skip-only run because they beat the game. But it was it was at my expense where, you know, I was, like, constantly in an uphill battle working against some of these units' bad stats, their bad growth rates, their lack of damage. And you'll be in a similar experience if you run bad units in this game. Now, this game does have some more powerful tools, like engravings, that allow you to kind of help units along more easily. So that's another aspect to the game that isn't really present in 3 Houses. There's also the emblem ring. So emblem rings are similar to gambits. They improve your stats and give you a huge ability. And there's no combat arts, but there are engravings, and there's, like, passives. And the passives are generally better than most of the 3 Houses passives, I would say. Or at least higher impact. But yeah, definitely like and subscribe if you found this useful or interesting. Also, feel free to drop a comment as to what you think about viability versus effectiveness. Because just because something is viable doesn't mean that it's optimal or effective. And I think that it's not super helpful to just tell new players, you know, oh, well, this character is really good when they're not. I think that's misleading. And if you have to be, like, insanely good at positioning or something in order to make use of some specific character, then you're just putting newer players in a position where they're going to be struggling more. And I don't think that's helpful, especially if the intent is to inform players and to have them reach success. So yeah, that's it for this one. Peace.